Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, the Eagles lose another top member of the front office. They try to bring back Nick Foles. They did sign another cornerback as well. A lot going on this week. We'll get into it all right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Tuesday edition of the show. It's episode 2 this week of 5. Download it into your phone wherever you get the podcast. We're free and available on all platforms, video form as well on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter as well at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE, and at GC24_football. Gino, another crazy day with the Philadelphia Eagles, a crazy few days to kick off the week. It's May 24th, and you're thinking the dead zone's going to come, and there's not going to be a lot of news after the draft. But last week, they signed James Bradberry, and then yesterday they bring in another cornerback, former Washington Commander, nickel corner Jimmy Moreland, who picked off Carson Wentz, by the way, week 1 of 2020. And they nearly brought back Nick Foles, or at least they were interested in a third stint with the Super Bowl MVP of 2017. And then today, we just saw 10 minutes before we record the show that they lost VP of Player Personnel Andy Weidl, who is now the new assistant general manager for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's never a dull moment to be an Eagles fan.
I had my eye on this whole Pittsburgh situation.
Yeah, this one we could see coming for sure.
Somebody who I follow all this stuff when it comes to moves in terms of scouting, front offices. This is another draft season for me. There's a lot of movement going on, especially in Philadelphia. And today, another jinx that I put into the universe, Lou. I said, I hope we don't lose Andy Weidl to Pittsburgh. Yeah. He ends up getting that promotion to go and get the assistant general manager position, which makes all the sense in the world. If you know Andy Weidl and his brother Casey, who is also in Philadelphia, they're from Pittsburgh. Andy grew up in the Pittsburgh scouting department. It was only a matter of time before he was going to go back there. And power to him, man. The Howie Roseman tree grows yet again. And it just seems that if you were under Howie Roseman at some point in time, you're going to have a chance to get into a high-profile position in a player personnel role.
The last 2 years, it feels like it. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Beyond that, with Joe Douglas, Andrew Berry, I mean, the list goes on and on.
2020 feels like I wouldn't have wanted to touch this front office with a 10-foot pole, but the way this team has turned things around the last 2 years, yeah, I mean, in just a few months, Gino, back in January and February, they lost 2 directors of player personnel in Ian Cunningham and Brandon Brown. They lost their VP of football operations, Frank Reich, who is very respected across the NFL. And then tonight you lose Andy Weidl. Those are 4 of your top front office members. So, I mean, it's kind of a compliment in a way, like you said. I mean, you see a coaching tree grow and you see a front office tree grow. It again shows how much people across the league respect the operations that you have in your organization. And that's why this is going to happen if you find success with your team. You just got to trust the guy that is cemented in their top role, and you have to trust that he's going to replace those guys like a coaching staff. You're going to lose Frank Reich and John DeFilippo when you win a Super Bowl because of elite quarterback play. Then you got to trust Doug Peterson to put the right coaches around him again. And so Howie Roseman hasn't had that problem so far. And we got to see him, though, kind of create a third stint here of his assistant staff.
That's one of the things that we really haven't had to sit back and say, are the people around Howie Roseman the right people for the job? I think that if you were to look at this quote-unquote factory, which Howie Roseman said Philadelphia was a couple of years ago, it's not for the quarterback. It's for the front office. And they're very well respected around the league in terms of how they promote from within. A lot of these individuals have had multiple promotions within Philadelphia. Ian Cunningham was there for almost 14 years, if I'm not mistaken. I saw him in an Eagles hat, scouting for the Eagles at CGS just a few weeks before he was hired away to the Chicago Bears. That's 4 high-ranking directors that are now out of the building. I look at this both as a positive and a negative because I was a big believer in Andy Weidl being a fantastic right-hand man for Howie Roseman, arguably the best that he's had between Joe Douglas, Andrew Berry, and Andy Weidel. And at the same time, you just have to trust the person that is putting them in that position. There's a reason Howie Roseman trusted these individuals. There's a reason that they were hired away. Continue with that process because that's not broken. Hiring from within, finding good people that you know you can mold and cultivate good information out of. What this presents is a positive in terms of new ideas and new ways to look at the board. I feel like every time there's somebody next to Howie Roseman, we hear a new way to evaluate prospects. I remember Joe Douglas. They completely overhauled that system. Then Andy Weidel comes in there from Pittsburgh, a completely different system than what Joe Douglas was using. And you incorporate ideas like that, and you have seen the evolution to get it where it is now, to get that recipe in player personnel, to understand what guys work, what is the process between a coaching staff and the front office, and also at the same time, what is the best way to work cohesively within that player personnel department. And that cohesion, you see the way these guys sit up on the stage, and I'm going to miss Andy Weidl being up there with his deep voice talking over Howie Roseman once the draft came around. And I always loved his insight because he really gave a good look at the background of the player, the Davion Taylor pick that they made last year.
Yeah,
I remember that story vividly, how they went out to Colorado to watch him against Oregon, and he was out in the field and just went back to being a scout. And I want to see them continue that way, that movement of just promoting from within, get guys that love football, and eventually things are going to click and they're going to get promoted. So hats off to Howie Roseman and hats off to all of these individuals, because I aspire to get into a position like that one day in my career. And they all started at the bottom somewhere. So that's a big step for 4 people in 4 months out of this Eagles building.
That's a lot of change, man, in the front office. So they're going to have to definitely replenish that front office over the coming months. But Gino, the front office still doing work with what they have in-house. While these, individuals are getting promotions, there's others still doing work, adding to the cornerback room. We'll get into the signing of Jimmy Moreland in a bit, but also they were looking into, apparently the last few weeks before he signed with the Indianapolis Colts, a potential second reunion with Nick Foles. We'll get into it coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's show is sponsored by rockauto.com. Save time and money when choosing Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership when Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. It's a family business. Rock Auto's been serving do-it-yourselfers now for over 20 years. With gas prices the way they are right now, save as much money as you can on your car or your truck by saving at rockauto.com. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. And when you go over to rockauto.com and see all the parts available for your car, your truck, make sure you write down Locked On in their "How did you hear about us" box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. All right, Eagles fans, thanks so much for tuning in to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Gino, it sounded like, we know the news now that Nick Foles is headed to the Indianapolis Colts to reunite with Frank Reich. But according to ESPN reporter Jeremy Fowler, it sounded like before Foles signed with the Colts, the Eagles at least had it, and we don't know how aggressively they pursued this. We don't know how interested they were, considering they do have Jalen Hurts in-house. They have Gardner Minshew. They brought in Carson Strong, and I know he was an undrafted rookie, but this was a guy I thought was a top 5, top 6 quarterback prospect in the draft. But it did sound like at some point they had some interest in making a second reunion with the Super Bowl 52 MVP. Fowler said specifically they brought up Foles when they were getting some Gardner Minshew trade interest, but the report says they decided to stick with the quarterback room they have. So, that could be true that they didn't pursue this aggressively, especially if they weren't getting the value they wanted for Minshew. But remember, I think this more has to do also with the fact that Nick Foles doesn't really want to come back to Philadelphia. Last year, there was a report that the Bears and Eagles were talking about a trade for Nick, and Foles said he would not report, and he did not sign off on that deal. So I think both sides, I think there was a little interest from the Eagles. I think they knew Foles didn't want to come back. And I also don't think they got what they probably wanted for Minshew. But again, the Eagles are a sucker for a good reunion story, and they are committed to always looking at ways to improve this quarterback room. And how better to do it than bring in the most popular quarterback in franchise history?
I think that's the key way that you have to look at this. And regardless of the name, the approach that they took to this is what I want to see my front office do. Take any outlet to see what the value on Gardner Minshew would have been. There were talks that he was one of the guys that they were willing to trade during the draft. They probably didn't get, I would say, a 4th-round pick. They were looking to get out of him.
Heartbeat. I mean, and then you sign Nick Foles for sure, and then I think it makes perfect sense. But to get a 7 and then you pay Nick, I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense.
Right, and you're going to throw away the money that you're saving by having these guys on rookie quarterback contracts to go and pay a guy in Nick Foles who realistically you don't want on the field anyway, unless it's the worst case scenario. So regardless of the individual that it was, I say that Gardner Minshew still being here on a rookie deal, plus adding Carson Strong, who, if you look at the play type of what Nick Foles was, I know I tweeted this out and you gave me some crap for it, but I'm not saying Carson Strong is Nick Foles. But if you want a guy who could stand in the pocket, deliver a beautiful deep ball, somebody who has the touch to deliver between the seams, Nick Foles or Carson Strong on a rookie deal. Nick Foles, we haven't seen him play meaningful football since his time with Matt Nagy and the Bears, who that was a disaster. Do you really know if he even has anything left in the tank at this point? Gardner Minshew, you saw the play that he could bring to you in 1 or 2 games a season, which that's exactly what you want in a backup quarterback, for a quarterback who your starter is a mobile guy who runs around, is susceptible to being hit. If you could get a guy who could come in and spot starts and has had big, meaningful minutes on a cheap deal, that's ideal in football. That's exactly what you want, the recipe that you want to cook up. Keep as many young quarterbacks as you can. Try to get value for them if they aren't the guy or if they're your backup. Yeah. And this wouldn't be the first time that the Eagles have gotten value.
Oh, no, they've done this over and over again. Yeah, I mean, they've gotten 2nd-round picks for Kevin Cobb and A.J. Feely, and I think tried moving Nick Foles. And yeah, for sure. And I know what they were thinking. You have a roster now that, like 2017, could be ready to make a deeper run than people think, and you don't want to have losing your QB1 derail that. So, of course, yeah, why not see if Nick Foles has another round of magic in him if you can get a top pick for Gardner Minshew? As much as me and you like the upside of Carson Strong, there's no way this team feels comfortable having him be the QB2 if you got a 4. So I totally
would be
get
insanity. That would be such a disgrace to the quarterback position, and just not doing your due diligence there to help out everybody in that room.
Not to mention his own injury and health issues with the knee. You know, I know he's fully healthy right now, but with that knee, you never know. So I get it. And again, like, even though Nick Foles has been horrible everywhere he goes outside of Philadelphia, as you mentioned, he flamed out in Chicago in 2020 and 2021. And, you know, Jacksonville gave him another chance to be a franchise quarterback in 2019, and it didn't work. But at the same time, Nick Foles is taking you already on 3 unrealistic runs in 2013, 2017, and 2018. He is different in Philadelphia when he puts on the number 9 jersey. It's like Thanos with the gauntlet and all of the stones versus without him. You know what I mean? So not to say that Thanos without the gauntlet was still pretty strong to show my Marvel nerd side. But so I get the logic. But yeah, I agree, to like assume that was going to happen again is probably a stretch. And I just think, again, the best case scenario, like you said, is that he doesn't play. And the worst is that this is a distraction that, I don't know, it's the same logic for me of why I didn't want them to draft Jalen Hurts. I don't want QB1 to look behind him. And especially in Philadelphia, if you have Nick Foles, the most popular quarterback ever, behind Jalen in the make or break year, I know Jalen wouldn't be as affected about it as Carson was, but it still would be a distraction. You know, if Hurts struggled, the fans would be calling for Foles. I think they need to not do that again and stick with a good backup they have in Minshew that doesn't create that kind of controversy.
I believe Gardner Minshew's best asset to this team is his knowing of what his role is. He knew that after that Jets game, it's Jalen's team. Like, as much as we might have talked about.
Although he did go to Sirianni and ask what he has to do to be the starter.
Well, you want to see that in a guy who had.
But I know what you mean. He wasn't causing a
Jackson.
distraction. Yeah, and fans aren't calling for Minshew like Nick Foles is a statue outside the stadium. I mean, you can say that it wouldn't affect the players. It's all fan service and it's just fan talk, and that doesn't impact things. It absolutely impacts things.
Ask 97.5 The Fanatic. They tweeted about it the other day, saying, would he be the guy over Jalen Hurts? Insanity. Don't even think about that for a second. But to take Gardner Minshew, see what you could get for him, not get anything, and sit on your hands, that might be the best move for this offseason at the quarterback position.
Well, can you get a comp pick too for him at some point? I don't know
if he becomes a free agent. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Lou. And I think that's what they're thinking is as well. We're either going to go out there and get a 4th-round pick for him.
Get more than what we would get in this comp pick formula. Yeah.
Or he's going to get, I mean, you would have to believe a team's going to pay him $10 to $15 million. That's the going rate for a decent backup for a young quarterback at this point in time. That's a 4th or 5th round comp pick. They'll take that any day of the week. And they're not going to have Nick Foles here for 2 years, which the deal is in Indianapolis. I see what they're thinking is in Indy, exactly what the Eagles are thinking in 2017. But now we have a window with Matt Ryan that might be 2 years. And if he goes down, we don't have multiple seasons to figure it out after that. Nick Foles would be the guy to step in there. And congrats to both parties involved. I think this works out best for Philadelphia.
Great. Frank Reich was
best for Nick Foles in Indianapolis.
Frank Reich was instrumental in turning things around for Nick Foles after he was struggling at the end of 2017 and kind of scrapping the playbook and bringing up what Chip did in 2013. That was all Doug, Frank, and DiFilippo for sure. And again, like I said, I get the logic of what the Eagles are thinking. You want to have a great backup when you have a roster that's ready to win. You saw that in 2017 and 2018, and heck, I mean, 2013, 2010, every year the Eagles have gone to the playoffs outside of 2021. The starter at the beginning of the season was not the starter at the end of that playoff game to end the season. But again, you have to use context, though. Quarterback's different than other positions. If you're like Nick Foles isn't just some good backup quarterback in Philadelphia. He's the guy that brought you your first ever championship in a city that already made him a polarizing figure in a quarterback debate. Right? I mean, you can't just say he's just another guy. And that's the same thing with why I was like with Jalen Hurts. Yeah, of course you want a good backup, especially for Carson Wentz, but a 2nd round label for a guy brings in a certain different weight and it brings a certain distraction. And, you have to use context with it. So I get why this didn't happen. And, I get it for Nick Foles too. Like, your legacy in Philly is perfect. Why come back and potentially taint it by, struggling? And I think Foles wants to keep it in the past. And I totally get why he wouldn't want to come back.
Perfect way to go out.
Why you're a legend. 2018
get all the clicks for every podcast and news station causing that quarterback controversy debate. We don't need that in Philadelphia anymore. And we have seen what the reunion path could bring in Deshaun Jackson. And
I wrote that down. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Sucks it happened that he went out that way. I would have loved the 2008 NFC Championship game to be like one of my lasting memories of that guy.
At least he gave us that last bomb against Dallas, though, in 2020. I agree, but I do love that he came back, and at least it didn't end as messy as it did with Chip. Like, we didn't hate Deshaun Jackson when he left, you know what I mean? So, but I get it. Yeah, that's proof that a reunion might not go as planned, and you do think a little bit differently, for sure. I think Allen Iverson went back to Philly at some point at the end of his career, too. It's almost sad to see, like, a legend before come back, and he doesn't have it anymore. I get where Foles' head is at.
This isn't like soccer where a guy will go back to his childhood club playing in a league that is way below his talent level, and he's going to make an impact. This is the National Football League. Horse and pony rides don't go over well.
Or they go to the MLS, really, right?
Yeah, they make their way to the MLS. You're exactly right. Outside of that, I mean, how many times has a guy come back and you said, oh, that made sense. Oh, that was a good reunion. That worked well for both sides involved. Maybe Vinny Curry, but that was a rotational player, and it wasn't great. I say get new talent, stick with what works. Gardner Minshew, knowing his role, being the backup to Jalen Hurts, having that cohesion in the quarterback room to make each other better day in and day out with zero distraction in a big name guy that would be Nick Foles. while still developing a young arm in Carson Strong.
Yeah.
Quarterback factory. Just kidding. I'm not serious on the quarterback
but I will
factory.
say,
It's a good way to go about
yeah,
that room, though.
And again, we've seen how reunions go, but again, with Nick Foles, there's just something different about when he's a different player when he is with the Eagles. His record in Philly, I
bring him back and retire his jersey in 10
I agree.
years.
That's the last time you want him back. But it is
100%.
crazy how he's like 28-12 or something. Don't quote me on that record in Philly. And then, the rest of his career, he's like 8-16 or something. And those records aren't correct. I don't have
He's
the
Chase Daniel with a Super Bowl ring, my friend.
Yeah,
he's making a killing now in his backup years. Hats off to him.
And then
he's
again,
gonna ride away with millions of dollars after that great story.
And one of the best playoff runs of all time. So I would prefer also to keep it in the past for sure. And then let him come back, retire number 9, and let him celebrate that 2017 championship. And he's a great fit in Indy. Again, Frank Reich knows how to use Nick Foles. Matt Ryan's not looking behind his shoulder. It's a team ready to win now. And, Reich gets it. Again, he was there. He was the mastermind behind a huge part of it. So why he wanted Foles makes pretty much the same amount of sense. Gino, the Eagles did actually make, though, a signing on the defensive side of the football yesterday, bringing in cornerback Jimmy Moreland. We'll get into that signing and what it means for the defense coming up next, right here on Locked On Eagles.
Before we talk about Jimmy Moreland, we got to talk about Jimmy Moore Built Bars. Of course, you got to go and get on this website called Built.com. Don't know if you've ever heard of it. In any of the 879 episodes that Lou and I have done together, we talk about them all the time. We eat them all the time. Open up my mailbox a couple days ago. Got a fresh new box of brownie batter puffs. Brownie batter puffs, folks.
Got the birthday cake ones here too, man. They're churning them out.
Churning out the delicious flavors. They're going to the Locked On Eagles podcast and asking us what our flavor recommendations are. Birthday cake, brownie batter. You're hitting all the I's and crossing all the T's with us. If you love going into that bowl of brownie batter, licking the spoon, it's essentially the same thing without any of the guilt. You can have one of these delicious brownie batter puffs today with 140 calories, 7 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs in each bar. Not only are they healthy, but they're delicious as well. They cover them with 100% real chocolate. It doesn't even taste like a protein bar. It tastes like you are baking some brownies, cutting them up, and putting them right on your plate and enjoying a nice, delicious treat. But instead, it's a nice, delicious Built Bar. And today you could go to their website, Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order. Get any of their original flavors, any of their limited edition flavors, and make sure to let them know that Locked On sent you by using the promo code at Built.com, LOCKED15 for 15% off your order.
All right, Eagles fans, wrapping up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On Today podcast. All the news across the world of sports in under 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your shows. Gino, the Eagles made a move yesterday at the cornerback position. For the second week in a row, they bring back James Bradbury. Not bring back, but sign him to a 1-year deal from the New York Giants on Tuesday. And then this past Monday, yesterday, they signed Jimmy Moreland, who was a 7th-round pick from the Washington football team. He is a cornerback that has 10 starts and 37 career games played. He has 1 career interception, was actually on Carson Wentz in 2020 when they were up, remember, 17-0. Carson Wentz looked like MVP Wentz for about 2.5 quarters. And then that Moreland pick kind of changed everything. So they bring him in, and I think this is good depth. He's a slot corner too, and you need a good slot corner behind Avonte Maddox. I feel like Zach McPherson, Tay Gawan, even Kerry Vincent Jr., most of those guys have been talked about as more boundary depth. You know what I mean? So to have more inside depth definitely helps, especially when you don't really have the safeties to play that spot with how thin that group is.
And I think that just opens up the versatility for Avonte Maddox to play back more at safety if they so desire to get him in that
I like
position.
that idea, man. They did it in 2018, and I thought he held his own back there.
And not only is Jimmy Moreland going to compete at that position, I fell in love with this guy when he came out of the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago after he was called up from the East-West Shrine game where he outperformed everybody there, outperformed everybody down in Mobile, gets on the Washington team as a 7th-round pick, and starts right away. He was an instant impact starter down there in Washington. He's played minutes. He can be a guy who comes in.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
If Avonte goes down, Avonte's somebody who has been susceptible to injury in his career. We do know that. And have a solid backup to him. At the same time, they have Josiah Scott, who they traded for a couple years back from Jacksonville, who the team thinks highly of as well on the inside. They're just continuing to boost up their depth at all of the corner positions. I think back to the Super Bowl years and beyond that, they had multiple nickel corners who could play. If you think about it, they had Cravon LeBlanc, they had Nickel Roby Coleman, they had Avonte Maddox. All of these guys were nickel-based players, and they had them all, and they were able to churn them out because the nickel position arguably could be the hardest corner position to play, with the ability for wide receivers to have two-way goes on you. You have to have unbelievable lateral athleticism.
You have to be able traffic.
You got to be able to open your hips, fight through traffic, understand short zones, when to leave stuff in front of you, when to open up your hips and run. It's a tough position to play. So bringing in Jimmy Moreland, somebody who has played in 30-plus games in the NFL, started 10-plus games in the NFL, it only gives you depth there. And you take away another piece from the Washington football team, whose secondary could probably use a guy like Jimmy Moreland. And when I was looking up Jimmy Moreland to see what other teams were looking at him, many people in Washington were writing about a potential reunion with Jimmy Moreland. So you now poach Jimmy Moreland from Washington, who was there prior to his stint in Houston before they cut him, James Bradberry, who was in New York, two guys that caused a big headache in Philadelphia with James Bradberry and Jimmy Moreland picking off Carson Wentz.
Yeah,
100%. Now you got him on your team, and they have 13 corners, I believe, on this roster as it stands.
A lot of competition for sure, which is good for a lot of inexperienced guys, man. So you're going to see who stands out.
We know the top four guys. It'll be Darius. It'll be James Bradberry. It'll be Zach McPherson due to him being a high pick. And it'll also be Avonte Maddox. After that, let the best couple guys win. And that's how it should be with a young group. Let competition prosper. See who has the best traits to develop. And also who can help you on special teams as well. That's going to be the big impact of the 4th, 5th, and 6th corner on your team. What is their special teams versatility? And a lot of those guys, Josiah Scott, Craig James, these guys have played in that department year over year. So it'll be interesting to see where Jimmy Moreland fits in. But to add guys who have NFL starts, NFL minutes into a room where you struggled with for the past decade, you can never sit on your hands in that department. You have to continue to try and evolve and get better there. So Jimmy Moreland, I'm a big fan of him, man. I'm excited to see him here.
It looks like a way better group. They headed out of the draft with Darius Slay. It was Avonte Maddox, Zach McPherson, Tay Gawan, Kerry Vincent Jr., and now to add James Bradberry and, as well, Jimmy Moreland. I mean, it looks way better. So again, I guess, Gino, this whole off season has really been a lesson of not to jump the gun and, assume an offseason went a certain way because of moves made in March. Heck, even April. I mean, the Eagles made 2 key moves in May, again, as they really do every single year. And so the corner group looks way better after claiming Moreland off of waivers from the Houston Texans. But yeah, he was a 7th-round pick for Washington back in 2019, did have that interception on Carson Wentz, and has 10 career starts. So crazy enough, with those 10 starts, one of the most experienced players in that young cornerback group. So we'll continue to get into it all throughout the week right here on Locked On Eagles. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. All platforms is available. Also in video form on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and head over to Twitter to talk to us about the Eagles each and every day at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Once again, thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast. All the news across the NFL in under 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your shows. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.